So I went ahead and graphed these correctly. I'm going to talk through them. So for number 1, you should have had a negative slope for your first line as well as a negative slope for your second line. Your solution should have been at negative 3, 4. If you did not put your solution, you kind of missed the whole point of why we're trying to do this. We're trying to get a solution, so make sure you do that. If you flipped this and made it positive, you ended up with the wrong solution as well as the other one. So be careful with your slope. Make sure you're going rise over run, up or down, and then left or right, as well as if it's negative, you need to go up and left or down and right.
What do you have to know before you get going on that? What is the most important point you've got to know in order to get this thing going?
Y-intercept?
Y-intercept. You don't have the Y-intercept. You are lost in space. Your car is off the road. Got to have, well, number 1, Y-intercept. When you see these problems today, got to have it.
Whoever you're going to ask a question.
That rise over run.
Make sure you guys have arrows because lines go on forever and ever in both directions, so they should always have arrows. Number 2, when you got these, they should have both looked similar. Both have the same slope, just different y-intercepts. They shouldn't have intersected at all, so that would have been no solution. Do we have questions on 1 and 2?
Can you solve it more?
There's nothing to solve here. This is just graphing.
So how do you get the like slope?
The slope is 1/3. So you go up 1 to the right 3. Up 1 to the right 3.
Oh, wait, is there a 90 degree on
I was asking
graphing systems?
if I kept the X.
Can I retake it?
The test replaced the quiz. The test replaced the quiz. We don't retake quizzes.
And for Y.
Speaking of grades, not this test, but this will be going into effect starting the next unit. When we take quizzes, if you give me quiz sections that have not been attempted at all, I will not be replacing it with the test. That's to help your grade. So if you're not practicing it, I'm not going to help you either. So attempt every problem that you can on each section of the quiz. If you do not attempt it at all, starting the next test, I will not be replacing that with your test grade. Keep that in mind moving forward.
What if like you just legitimately don't know how to do it?
Same thing. If you do not attempt a quiz section, I will not be replacing it with the test moving forward. Number 3. One of these was a horizontal line. So it should have just been a horizontal, not vertical, not diagonal. And then the other one had a negative slope. These 2 lines intersected at negative 1, 4. For number 4, the first line was positive. The second line should have been negative. And they cross at 3, negative 1. Do we have questions on either of those 2? Now, all the other ones I'll be doing, I just wanted that to be up because it takes me a minute to draw every point. Also, when you're doing your graphs, make sure you're drawing as many slope points as possible, not just a couple. Do fill up the entire graph with your slope points. And then we can go on to the next page. Oh, excuse me. For substitution, I'll go back. For the first one, you needed to substitute them into each other since they were both y equals. So, and these, most of these were worth 4 points. The last one was worth 5, and I'll show you why. You needed to set them equal to each other. 6x, negative 6x plus 1 equals negative 8x plus 1. Since they're both a y equals. And then solve this like you would an equation with variables on both sides. Pick something, move it. And then pick the other thing and move it back. So these would cancel, these would cancel. Actually, these would cancel too. So this would be 0 equals 2x, negative 2x. Divide both sides by negative 2. Remember that 0 can be an answer. I switched x equals 0. Same thing. Put 0 back into one of your equations to find your y value. So 0, nope, that's y. Y equals negative 6 times 0 plus 1 would give us 0 plus 1 or just 1. And then make sure you're putting your final answer as an ordered pair. 0, 1. Do we have questions on that one? Number 2, you had an equation that was a y equals, so you could take that, put it into the other one. Some of you solved this one so it was also in a y equals and solved it the same way for number 1. That was fine, as long as you solved everything correctly. So really, the points for these were, did you substitute correctly, solve to get the first variable correctly, solve to get the second variable correctly, and is your order pair correct? All of those. So you would take that second equation and put it into the first and solve. Once you get your value, I'm doing math in my head and not typing it out. This should be 24. There we go. Once you get your x value, it should have been negative 3. None of these should have been decimal or fraction answers. Once you get one variable, put it back into either equation, but this would be the easier of the two. Y equals 3 times negative 3 plus 7. So our ordered pair would be negative 3, negative 2. And then can I go through all of this? Do we have questions on number 2? Three is very similar because it has an equation that's solved for y already. We're just going to substitute that back in. So I'm going to take this, put it in for the first one. Remember that if it's an x equals, you're substituting in for x. if it's a y equals, you're substituting in for y. When you substitute these, if you have an x and a y still left in your equation, something's wrong. So go back and check it. So in this case, we can solve for x, combine our like terms. And continue solving for x. After you find your x, you can go back, find y. So put 2 in for x. Once you have your x and your y, put those as an order here. So 2 steps. Questions on that one? The very last one, you did not have an x or y equals, so you needed to get one of the equations in x or y equals. The easiest of the two to do that would be the one with the coefficient of just 1. So I could solve for this. So this is why this one had an additional point. Because you needed to solve this for x by adding 8y to the other side. And then once you have an equation that is x or y equals, you can put that back into the other. So now that it is x equals, we can put that back into the first one. 3 times 8y minus 10 minus 4y equals 10. Combine your like terms, so this would be 20y. And you can solve 4y, add 30, and divide by 20. Put this back in to your x equation to find your x, what x equals. What was that? 8y minus 10. So this would be 16 minus 10, or just 6. So your ordered pair would be 6.
You know, like put equation back into the other one. Does it have to be the opposite every time?
Like when you start it, or here.
Like,
Yeah,
I'm
like-
sorry, you put the 8 lines.
So I put this where x was. You end up with the other variable. Is what always happens, yes.
Can you pull up 2 just real quick? Just on the subtraction of negative 5x minus the 3x plus 7, remember that minus sign outside of parentheses hits both terms inside the parentheses. Doesn't just hit the 3x, right, as a reminder. I think most of you got that, but just pay attention there. So negative 5x minus, it's going to be minus 3x, and then a minus 7 to plus 7 doesn't stay there. That negative, the minus sign takes care of both terms inside the parentheses.
So if you did end up doing plus 7, it kind of threw everything else off. Any questions on this last one before we get into elimination? All of the elimination problems were worth 4 points apiece. How you eliminated, solving to get the first variable, solving to get the second variable, your order pair. So show me how you add or subtract. For these two, for number 1, I can get rid of my 3's by adding. So if I add these two, this would become 0. -7 plus 5 would become -2. 13 plus a -11 would be -2. And I could divide both sides by -2. I'm sorry, this is +2, but you're still dividing by a negative, so you end up with a -1. So like something there is off. And then you could put that back into either equation and find x. So -3x plus 7. And then you can solve for x, get rid of 7, and divide. Numbers aren't numbers anymore. And then write your order pair, -2, -1. Do we have questions on that one?
When you're following directions, I saw this a couple times yesterday, make sure if you're doing substitution or elimination, just at the top, small thing but a big thing. Are you substituting or are you eliminating? What are the directions?
Outline it, underline it, highlight it, whatever. Because if you substitute when you're supposed to be eliminating, you won't get that much credit for it, as well as vice versa. For number 2, if we eliminate our x's, they are both positive, so we can subtract. So these would become 0, -4 minus a -3 would be -4 plus 3, or -y. -20 minus -24 would be -20 plus 24, so this would be 4. Divide both sides by -1. Then put that back into one of the equations, does not matter which one. And solve. So this would be plus 16. And you could solve for x, subtract 16 on both sides, and divide. So your order pair would be -6, -4. Questions on that one? For number 3, neither of these coefficients are the same, so you need to change them. There were various ways to do that. Change both x's so that they were 16, change them to something else. Change both the y so that they were both 15 or something else. Many of you did the y's, but some of you did other. It really doesn't matter. So here, actually I'm just going to do this one. I'm going to multiply this by 2 to get 16x plus 6y equals 36. The 16s are both positive, so we can subtract. This would give us 0. 5 minus 6 would give us negative y. 30 minus 36 would give us negative 6. Divide both sides by negative 1, and y would be 6. Put 6 back into any of these 3 equations, does not matter which one. And solve for x. So we have negative 8x plus 18 equals 18. When I start solving for x, this becomes 0. So when I divide, my x stays 0. So my ordered pair would be 0, 6.
That's a lot of zeros.
Yes. What time is it? 43. So we're going to do 4, and then I don't know if we'll have time to do the other, start any of the other 3. But when we come back from lunch, I'm going to set up each one. We're going to solve one of them by graphing in the calculator. Solving by elimination and substitutions we've just done. So I'm really just going to show you how to set it up, solve one by graphing, and show you the answers for the workshop. But let me finish this problem first. So here we don't have the same coefficient for x or for y. Pick whichever one you want to get rid of. Some of you got rid of x, some of you got rid of y. I'm going to multiply this by 9 and this by 5. Get rid of the y's. Someone with a calculator multiply 9 and 29 for me. Because I don't remember what that is off the top of my head.
9 and what?
Negative 29.
Negative 2.
Thank you. And then 28 and 5.
140.
140.
Why did we multiply them by 9?
So here we're trying to get the y's to eliminate. So the lowest number they both share is 45. So if I multiply this by 9, this would give us 45, or no, if I multiply this by 5, this would give us 45. But I have to multiply everything by those numbers. I could have chose the 9 and the 8 or something else. It's just I chose these two. The 45s are both negative, so we're going to subtract to get rid of them. 81 minus a negative 40 would be 81 plus 40, which I think is 121. Correct me if I'm wrong. The y's would cancel, become 0. Negative 261 minus negative 140 would be adding 140, but I don't know what that is off the top of my head. 121. And then divide both sides. So x would be negative 1. Put that back in to find y. I'm going to do this really quickly. The bell's going to ring and you guys can go out for lunch. And then we'll finish this one when we get back there. The final answer for that one was negative 1,4. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to set up each one. Variables in equations. We're going to solve one of them, and then I'm going to show you the answer to the others. For this one, traveling downstream a certain point with 21, step one, we have to find the current and the speed of the boat. That means the current speed and the speed of the boat. So the two things you need to find, or two things you don't know, are going to be your variables. Call them what you want. I'm going to say C and B for current speed and boat speed. Remember that these need to be specific. For this one, that's as specific as we can get, but for others, it should be cost of, number of, whatever. Downstream, it would go fast, the boat would go faster, so we're going to add those two. B plus C equals 21. Upstream, the boat would go slower, so we're going to get rid of our current speed because it's no longer pushing the boat along. So B minus C equals 1. Each of these questions were worth 8 points. 2 for your variables, defining them. 2 for your equations, setting them up. And then 1 for how you solve to get one of the variables. The variable answer with units. The other one for solving to get that second variable, and then that second variable's answer with units. So this one we're going to solve by graphing in the calculator. So if you wanted to solve word problems by graphing, you would need to go grab your calculator. Change both of these equations to x and y. So I'm going to rewrite them as x plus y equals 21 and x minus y equals 1. I then need to set both equations equal to y, solve for y. So I would subtract x on both sides for both equations. The first one would give me y equals negative x plus 21. The second one, I have to continue solving. I have to divide everything by negative 1 to get y equals x minus 1. We would put those two in our calculator in y equals negative x plus 21 and x minus 1. Once they are both in your y equals, you're going to graph it. If your graph looks something like mine, because my class before was doing linear regression, you may need to move this. So if you go into Zoom Standard, it'll take you back to the regular 10 by 10. Yes. Is that what error? It could be because you put in a minus and then a negative. Okay, so here I see one of them, but I don't see the other one. Let me make sure it's on first. So to find where that second one is, I also have different things on, so hold that thought for 1 second so I can turn this off. I need to zoom this either out or zoom to fit so I see where they intersect. So zoom. If I scroll down to zoom fit, which is 0, I can see that they're going to intersect, but they don't intersect in this window. They have to intersect in this window in order to use the calculator option. So I'm going to zoom out one more time. So zoom out and then enter. Now I see that they actually intersect. I can go into second trace for my calculate method or menu. Find where they intersect for number 5. Hit enter 3 times. And it would tell me that they intersect at 11:10. So you would write that intersection point, 1110. Then you would tell me what those mean. So X was B, so our B equals 11, and our units was miles per hour. Our Y was C, so that was 10 miles per hour. If we were solving by graphing, that's all the work you would need to show me. Colin?
It won't zoom out any further.
I'd have to look at it. Give me a second and I'll look at it. Do we have any other questions on this one? Just to recap other upstream, downstream things. Downstream is plus, upstream is minus. Down the river is plus, up the river is minus. Those are opposites. If it's a plane and wind situation, with the wind is plus, into the same wind is minus. With a tailwind is plus, against the wind is minus. For the other ones, I'm just going to set up variables, equation, and then tell you what the answers are. That way you have more time to take your test. For number 2, the two things it's asking us are to find the price of an adult ticket and the price of a child ticket. So those would be your two variables, call them A and C, X and Y, does not matter. So this would be price of adult ticket and price of child ticket. Your two equations, if you're not sure how to start with the totals. It equals 149 and 295. Because these totals are talking about ticket sales have to take into account the number of tickets sold and their costs. So I'm going to need 11 and 2 and A and C. So 11A plus 2C. And then 9A and 14C. And then you have options, solve it by graphing, elimination, substitution. However you solve that, you should get A equals $11 and C equals 14. So there are steps missing that I'm not showing for time reasons. Remember, even if you're not sure how to solve it, write down the things you know, because I do give partial credit, and those are their own points. Do we have any questions on how we set them up, define the variable? The answer, obviously, because you don't see how I got them. This one is going to be set up very similarly. The two things we don't know are the number of students in each van and in each bus. So I can say B and V equal number of students in each bus and in each van. Totals, it tells us the total number of students, so 187, 154, we could start there. To get the total number of students, we would need to know the number of students in both vans and buses, and how many vans and buses there were for both high schools. So 3B and 7B, 12B, and 1B, or just B. would be how you set those up. Then you could either solve by graphing, solve by substitution, solve by elimination. And the two answers you would get are D equals 11 students and B equals 22 students. Do you have any questions on how we set that up? Have any last minute questions before you take your test?
I just got one power reminder. And you guys real quick, does this slope equal that slope?